All right, we're back in session. Jason?
All right. Thanks for coming in, Matt. You know, as time goes by, we're trying to streamline this process more and more. So here we all are together, so that the commissioners and the clerk's office are both on the same page as we build the budget together. So we'll ask you to just introduce yourself for the record, and then you know the drill. Just kind of go through and hit some of your highlights and big changes, asks, and things like that, and I'll find those $200 increases without your help.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Matt Olson, Director of Bannock County Juvenile Justice. When I came in for the initial orientation for this year's budget, we were asked to do 4 things. 1 is maintain a flat budget. 2 was look for efficiencies in our processes. 3 was cross-training for staff, and 4 was succession planning. So what I'd like to do today is highlight those things in the budget where we do have adjustments or changes, and some reasons for those adjustments and changes. And then, if it's okay with everybody, if I could hit some of the highlights and report back to everybody on those other areas that we were asked to be considering as we planned our budget for 2024. So, I think most of you are aware that Bannock County Juvenile Justice really has funding from 4 main areas. 1 is we have county funds that we receive, and so we have a county budget. We have JCA block grant funds that we receive from Department of Juvenile Corrections, which is a separate budget. We have tobacco tax funds that also come through the state of Idaho, which is a separate budget. And then we collect probation and diversion fees and other court-ordered fees that then go into a juvenile workshop trust. So I'd like to start with, I think, the first budget that you have in your book most likely, which is Juvenile Programs County budget. That's the 110-115. I have not put cost of living increases or step increases into my budget request because I expect those decisions will be made through the clerks and also the commission. You know, I proposed those in years past, but we don't know what the revenue is and what all the opportunities are for that. So it's not that I don't support them, I just understand that those decisions will be made once the full picture is looked at. So, but we do have a couple of adjustments we're requesting. So, one of the adjustments we're requesting is in 106-601, we have a part-time juvenile program specialist. That person actually we felt should be reclassified to a coordinator. Right now for us, a coordinator job description is a grade 8. We reviewed that job description with Ryan. He took a look at it, and as he put together the family of job descriptions, he agreed. If the commission were to approve that request, which for us we feel is very important from a standpoint of equity in terms of the work she does being consistent with our other coordinators, that would be an increase of $3,428 in salary. We do have some salary savings that will cover that. We had a probation officer that had resigned that had a number of years of experience. This is the person 106-114. The new probation officer working in that area, you know, her salary's probably a little over $5,000 less than the person that we had there previously. And then that person that resigned was also somebody who was eligible for senior probation officer status, which we had kept $3,364 in a stipend for that in case that was going to be utilized. At this point, we don't have anybody that will be eligible for senior probation officer status. They're already either senior probation officer status or they don't have the years of service to be considered. So I removed that from the budget, but left most everything else the same. So just in summary on this budget, in 2023, the salary budget that was approved was $523,193, and what we're requesting for 2024 is $515,852, which is a reduction of $7,341 in salary, even if that grade increase is funded that we're requesting. So.
And that amount is included in your request, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on the county budget? Oh, I do have one other area, and that is in the county budget. Years ago, we moved operating expenses from our budgets that we had for county and block and tobacco to a workshop trust fund so that those operating expenses are paid out of fees that we collect for probation and those types of probation and diversion fees. And so we've been able to maintain, for the most part, a pretty flat budget in operating expenses, but we do have a position that's a part-time position, our truancy court coordinator position. We share that expense with the school district. They pay half, we pay half. That individual receives or uses her cell phone significantly to get calls from the schools. She's only part-time, so she gets calls when she's out of the office. And so we had a cell phone stipend that we requested earlier in the year that we had the funds for. And so for 2024, we're requesting that she continue to receive that cell phone stipend. So that would increase our operating expense in the county budget $480. So again, overall, still a reduction pending what the commission decides to do regarding step increases and cost of living and those types of things. So, any questions on the county budget?
Yeah, we're gonna pay that cell phone stipend out of the truancy grant, truancy court budget, right?
Yes.
So that's why we're gonna move the whole to 10,480 to there, right?
To the truancy court budget.
Right. And then we'll pay the stipend.
Okay.
Right.
For
Okay.
So it goes into a
cell phone
grant.
stipend is out of A budget,
Okay,
so we just,
we'll move it up.
in there, well, or we can just move the full amount to the truancy court and then pay the cell phone stipend out of the truancy court,
Okay,
out of A.
I think whatever works best for an accounting standpoint, so.
Perfect. Okay.
Second budget that we have is the JCA budget. There's really no change there. We have 3 employees that are paid out of that budget. The salary was $159,395 in 2023. We're not requesting any grade increases or changes in that regard, and there is no operating budget or B budget for that, for the JCA block. So right now that budget we're proposing would remain the same. Any questions about the JCA budget? Okay. So third budget is the tobacco tax budget. And in that budget, we have 4 full-time employees, probation officers. We are experiencing some salary savings there. One of our full-time probation officers who was at market became one of our supervisors, and that position he filled was in our county budget. The new hire is making about $10,000 less. So we do expect, in terms of salary, $10,379 reduction in the tobacco tax budget. Again, that doesn't take into account the other, whether or not cost of living or step increases, but at this point, only one of those employees would be eligible for step increases. The other employees in this budget are at the maximum range, so unless that were to change. And there is no B budget here either, it's all personnel. So, any questions in that regard? All right, Juvenile Workshop Trust, this is always a
Real
bit...
quick, that's page 94. And it's the bottom section, 329855.
So the revenue for this comes from a number of places, but primarily probation and diversion fees. There are some other court-ordered fees and restitution the court may order that does come into this account. And this is where obviously the majority of our operating budget is. These aren't necessarily, they're obviously taxpayers who are paying those fees, but these don't come from the county general fund dollars. We have made some increases here, but tried to make corresponding decreases where we felt like we could. And part of the reason for those increases is the startup of the Safety and Assessment Center. Right now, where our plan is to cover as many of the operating costs that we cover with the trust in terms of paper, travel, those types of things. So there were some slight increases. One is in operating supplies. And sometimes these are named a little bit different than I'm used to, but we have done an increase in terms of employee clothing allowance from $1,600 to $2,000. We also did an increase in hostess and luncheons from $400 to $800. This really has to do with us having snacks on hand available for youth at the Safety and Assessment Center. So when kids are brought in, If they haven't eaten or if they're there for a while, while they're doing the assessments and they're hungry, we want to be able to have some snacks and things like that available. The other change is in terms of repairs and office maintenance. We increased that, taking into account Safety and Assessment Center. Travel, we increased that budget. There's going to be some travel as part of the Safety and Assessment Center, so that went from $3,000 to $5,500. We also increased telephone because we have to pay for telephone, so that went from $3,000 to $6,000. In terms of uniforms, this is really where these are the Kevlar vests. We had a reduction there from $9,000 to $2,000. We had a number of employees who had vests that were expiring in 2023, and so that was part of the reason for that increased expense for us there. But that will help us offset some of the other expenses that we have increased. And then in terms of miscellaneous expense, we're requesting increase from $5,000 to $8,000. Again, we're anticipating some costs and expenses and things that have to do with the Safety and Assessment Center. It's hard to know what all those will be as we start up. Bottom line is in 2023, our budget in this account was $102,420, and the request for 2024 is $103,220. So it is a slight increase overall. So those cover our four main budget areas. Any questions about the tobacco tax budget or the workshop trust budget?
Where we got the grant from the state for some of the operations for safety, do you think we're going to need some of these increases, or are these just a fallback?
They're a fallback at this point.
But we'll try to fund everything we can from the grant monies.
Yes. It's, I could give you the historical numbers on what we've done in the trust, but we have tried to be very frugal even with these trust fund dollars. And so we've been able to build up a surplus in those trust fund dollars, which I'll talk about how that might be utilized here in just a moment. So.
My only comment is the miscellaneous expense. I hate that title.
Okay.
And what we'll do is we can have that money sitting there, but maybe not allocated to a line, but when it's paid, we will definitely pay it from a line for the transparency of expenses. The other thought is we could just throw it into operating.
Well, miscellaneous to me is like a slush fund. I mean,
Yeah.
It doesn't say what the purpose is. That's all.
Well, and we can break that out. I mean, I took some money out of car repairs, so I can put that back in and subtract that out of miscellaneous, so that's clear. And I think originally when we had that miscellaneous, it may have been COVID expenses that we're paying out of there initially, I think, but I can't remember for sure.
It's just one of them deals that somebody looks at that. What do you mean miscellaneous? You got a cookie jar full of cash.
I'm happy to go through these other budget items and see where we can make adjustments and take it out if we need to.
Just the title is the deal to
Matt,
me.
usually the easiest is just to run to operating.
Operating.
Because
Okay.
operating is kind of a unanticipated one-time spend, whereas office supplies are usually
Okay.
recurring paper and stuff like that, so we could just start up there too.
Okay, we can do that. So, okay. I did have a capital outlay request. One of our concerns right now is at the Juvenile Justice Center. In our back offices, we have probation officers who have very small offices that can't really accommodate more than 2 people, and even in those situations, there's oftentimes not room for 2. The other concern that we have is that they're just partitions and there is no privacy, so that when you're talking to families about circumstances in their lives, as it gets personal, those conversations can be overheard, which is a significant concern for us. In addition, it's just hard to work back there and concentrate. If you go back there and sit back there and you're trying to meet with somebody and you have a phone call on your left and a phone call on your right, you can hear all of that information. I think it's hard on our staff to have that level of, I'll just say stimulus without having some level of privacy to be able to do your work. So met with Dan, and he came and took a look at our offices back there. With people moving out of the Juvenile Justice Center into the Safety and Assessment Center, we could take the offices there, and we have 4 probation officers back there. We'd create 4 offices. They would be bigger. They would be personal offices where they have more privacy, where they can have those conversations. I think families would feel safer and more comfortable. Estimate right now, and that would be about $60,000. I think there's two options that I'd propose for consideration. One is whether or not there's any ARPA funds that could be used for that. I don't know if that's a possibility. I do know we're using them quite a bit for the Safety and Assessment Center. We do have surplus funds within the workshop trust that if ARPA funds weren't available, that we could access those funds that would be able to cover that cost. And not put us in a significant financial bind. So to me, this is really the critical improvement that we need at our office, and enough so that I think it would be good use of those surplus funds if there weren't any other funds available.
And I've met with Matt on a couple times and toured the offices, so I've kind of pushed Matt to bring this to us at this point in time, because I agree with Matt that some of the conversations and things they have over there held in a very open area are not appropriate. And so I appreciate Matt doing the groundwork to put this together, so thank you for that.
I appreciate the support.
So I would like to look to see how much you have in surplus funds
Okay.
before we determine if those should be used or if we've got other resources that would be maybe better, rather than cutting your workshop funds just simply because that's your operating money.
Right.
And Matt has been operating with all of his operating costs coming out of that for probably at least 12 years,
Yeah,
if
I'd
not
say,
longer.
yeah.
So he's done a really good job of managing that money. We may have some other one-time funds that we wouldn't have to touch that, just to make sure that he can remain self-sufficient.
I think that we'll end up coming and looking at all the capital
Yeah.
projects that everybody has, and then have a conversation about that, and then the funding.
That'll be hopefully part of the recap
Yeah.
meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the, where they come from and what we can fund.
There's one other budget issue that I hadn't initially proposed because there wasn't a county policy that had been approved yet, and that has to do with on-call. I was asked to bring information to this meeting regarding options there. So I just wanted to review, looking back at the last 11 weeks, probation officers that have been on call have dealt with an average of 4.5 separate calls or incidents that they've had to respond to. Those can be as short as quarter of an hour, or they can, if you have to come into the office and deal with something, I think one of them was 8 hours. So the average is about 4.5 calls per week right now, with an average of 3.68 hours of actually on-call work. So when I go into their time cards, I can see where their on-call work is, that is those after hours. Our probation officers are on call starting at 5 o'clock, and then they're on call until 8 o'clock the next morning. Of course, they're on call all day Saturday and Sunday. Looking at the county's draft policy, if that were adopted, it seems to me, if I'm reading it correctly, that our probation officers would be what they called staff member, employee with that's on call with pay status. And what it's proposing is 1 hour a day, essentially, for each day that they're on call. So for us, that's obviously 365 days a year we have to have somebody on call. We have 9 juvenile probation officers that are not exempt, that are in the on-call rotation. They would each cover about 4 weeks a year. So we'd be looking at about 40 weeks of those individuals having on-call responsibility. There's 3 of us that are exempt, so I haven't included those expenses here just because it's part of our exempt status. So if we have 40 weeks of paid on-call, 1 work hour per day, that's a total of 280 days that we would need funding. If it's 1 hour a day, then our average among those probation officers right now in terms of hourly wage is about $24. So that would be an increase of $6,720 if it was funded based on that 1 hour per day that you get credit for if you're on call. The other option, which is one that I proposed earlier, is if we give probation officers a credit of work hour for every weekday they're on call, Monday through Friday, and then 2.5 on Saturday and Sunday. That would be 10 hours. Our probation officers work 4 10s. That would give them the opportunity to flex time during the day on those weeks that they're on call, so they can make sure they're available in the evening. if right now the average is 3.68 hours, we're talking about them flexing, somewhere around 6.5 hours or those types of things. So the benefit to them of being on call, if they're not being compensated, would be really the ability to flex that time and get credit for a work hour each day that they were on call, and then 2.5 hours for the weekend days they were on call. Does that make sense?
And we've had this discussion with a couple other groups.
Yeah.
We don't feel like we can have a county set policy for that fits every department. And so how it would work best for your department, like sheriff's office was just in here and they're talking about $50 a day for those that are on call. And so, and then probation, adult probation, they flex. So which way do you feel would work the best for you? I don't want to turn this into a conversation totally on, because we're talking budgets, but what would work for you?
Our conversation with staff initially was talking about this flex, and what we used to do was flex years ago. If you're on call, you would work 36 hours and you could flex 4. Our on-call situation has changed to where we have to be more available with our computers to respond, to complete any paperwork, affidavits, motions, detention orders. Those things aren't done verbally anymore. They have to actually be done with those documents. So I can say, from a budget standpoint, and talking to some staff, they say, well, the extra money doesn't mean a ton to us. It's nice, but I think their time is what's really valuable. And the time is very meaningful. So I think flexing the time would probably be what most would prefer, but I can double check and make sure.
And that's what I'd encourage is find out, and then come up with your policy, and then we'll have to come before the commissioners and approve that. But the way we was going is too cumbersome. Everybody's got different
needs.
And so I think that we can't just put a blanket over the top of it. We need to.
Just do a department by department.
I'll visit with our staff, talk about these, see if there's a third option that I haven't thought about that helps us maintain what you've asked us to maintain. And then we'll put together a proposal of which route.
Like I say, Tony come in and he says that, he has 4 people on the bubble. The 2 that are on call, actually, they'd get $50 a day, the same as some of his detectives and stuff. So
okay. We will get that.
In the money wise, I think that we need to stay pretty comparable.
Okay.
How we compensate people.
So
I don't want a bunch of different programs where we compensate people a lot different, but
I'll reach out to Tony and I'll reach out to Evie as well, because I want to make sure we're comparable. So
yeah.
Just
Any further
report.
comments on that?
Nope, that's,
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. So
What were we gonna say?
I was just going to report back on those other areas we were asked to take into consideration. If you're ready for that, or
Yep, I think so.
You got 5 minutes.
I'll be fast. So look for efficiencies in our processes. I wanted to talk first about, we've developed in-house trainers in a number of areas so that we can save on those training costs, specifically CPR and first aid, restorative practices and restorative circles and conferencing. We have trainers for family group decision-making, aggression replacement training, child and adolescent development, as well as motivational interviewing. So a lot of those are core trainings for us, and we have trainers in-house that can provide that. So we experience a lot of cost savings for that. We also collaborate with other agencies for training. So Pocatello Police are going to help train us in ARCON. So they have agreed to do that as just part of our partnership. In collaboration, Bannock County Sheriff's Office is a big support to us. They train us in pepper spray, also did training in drug recognition. Southeast Idaho Public Health is a good partner for us in terms of training and also offering us space. And then Department of Juvenile Corrections. And this year, Ada County is going to train 2 of our new staff in EPICS, which is a pretty significant training at no cost. They just offered that, being good partners. So we're saving a significant amount of money in that regard. We're utilizing senior juvenile probation officers to assist with training new staff based on areas of strength and expertise. So we're really trying to capitalize on the strengths that we have in our office to train other staff and new staff. We created an intranet folder with the help of computer services where we can make sure all of the documents we're using to file in court or other documents that we use are all current and up to date and nobody's using old documents. And then we're talking about utilizing what's called a daily duty officer. When you're at work in our office, calls for crisis and needs for help come in all day long, and we're trying to track people down who might be available. If we have a duty officer that's like an on-call officer during work hours, that's their responsibility to take all those calls and to respond to all that. I think that'll help make us more efficient and also more responsive to those requests. So, cross-training for staff. With Safety and Assessment Center coming online, there's going to be new procedures and protocols over there, so we're going to cross-train our staff in what those are. That will allow us to potentially have staff help cover some shifts and things like that, particularly as people take vacation or if the needs arise, so we want to make sure there's cross-training there. We have monthly staff meetings where each employee provides updates regarding their area of responsibility, so that keeps us up to date on what's going on with the Youth Development Center, the diversion programs, drug court, those types of things. We're developing a field training manual for our coordinators. We have a field training manual for probation officers. I'm developing one for coordinators, and that will include cross-training so they can observe other programs that aren't so specific to really what their area of focus is, but will allow them to see other job duties and things so they're more familiar with that. And that manual will make sure that we get them to all of those opportunities. And then we're doing cross-training with other agencies as well, including Health and Welfare, Department of Juvenile Corrections, and we have one actually scheduled for next week for our crossover youth practice model where we're having a multi-agency cross-training. So in terms of succession planning, we have three, I'll just say supervisory administrative positions in our department. We have a director, a chief JPO, and assistant chief JPO. The chief JPO, you know, is very experienced, very capable, very competent. It's been my approach to have them have as much autonomy as possible in working within our vision, our scope of what we do, to how we best do that. And I think that's really helped us capitalize on the talents of the people that we've hired. And you've seen that with the Safety and Assessment Center. Our new assistant chief JPO, very experienced, and already I've been so impressed with his ability to jump in, start to understand things, and really have seen him progress in this new role as well. But we try to get him in front of the commission where they're learning how to do certain things like present before the commission and how to be on an agenda request. And so, but we also meet as a management team and they provide input, and really as it relates to the units they supervise, I said, you know, that it's really their opportunity to say, hey, here's our vision and goals of what we want to accomplish. And I think as opposed to it always being top down, this is what you got to do, we're taking their great ideas, their initiative, and really capitalizing on that to constantly improve things. We do have senior JPOs that have 5 years of experience and have met certain benchmarks. We're going to use them to provide more training, but we're also having them specialize in certain areas like gang awareness, gang training, substance abuse delivery services. They're specializing in caseloads in some situations. And so we're providing them opportunities to develop expertise in certain areas that then becomes a benefit to us as a county as well. But I think it really expands what their understanding is of how it all works. So we'll continue to look for ways to improve in each of these areas, but those are just some of the highlights in terms of those areas we were asked to report on.
Very good.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will get back. I guess I go first to Christy and Jason on the on-call. Is that correct?
Yep. And then we'll put it in the clerk's recommendation. We'll probably do a follow-up meeting within the next couple of weeks or around the time of the clerk's recommendation, just to get all on the same page with how we're going to do the on-call. But we'll be talking to the commission so that we can be on the right